Welcome back to the SSL Family Dad channel. It has been a while since I have posted a video, and so I wanted to take some time and share with you guys something that I was recently able to be part of and something that I've learned here in the last couple weeks. I was recently able to take a trip to Cuba with our church to do some mission-related things, and while I was there, I was able to take some video and kind of see some of the countryside in Cuba and how the people are living and different things, and I wanted to share with you guys a lot of things that I learned about how they're living and about sustainability. The Cubans have one thing figured out, that's for sure, and that is living sustainably and living with the resources that they have and the things that they have available to them and making the best use of those things. A lot of times, here in America and other European countries and around the world, we can get in this mindset that we have to go to the store and we have to buy everything. If I need to build something, if I need to fix something, if I need to have animals, whatever, I need to go buy all these new things. And the price tag, it's really endless, the amount of things that you can need or buy. And the difference is in Cuba, the resources they have are much more limited. They don't have a Home Depot. They don't have the corner store. They don't have a place where they can just conveniently run out and jump in their car and go buy whatever they need. So they need to make do with what they have. So we took a flight from Flint, Michigan down to Atlanta, and then from Atlanta to Havana, Cuba. And the first thing, of course, that I noticed was I went from about 20 degrees on the way into the airport in Flint down to about 80-something degrees when we got into Havana. So Cuba does have a completely different growing season and growing conditions than we would have here in Michigan. The climate is completely different. Cuba being just a few hundred miles off the southern coast of the United States, it'd be very similar to maybe a southern Louisiana, Alabama, Florida, something like that, but even a little bit warmer and more tropical. But outside of the temperature difference, the first thing that I noticed was just how they live their everyday life. Cuba has been kind of cut off from the United States as far as importing American products and other things, and the relations between the Cuba and the United States have been kind of broken since I think the 40s or 50s, somewhere in there. And so you can see that as it's almost frozen in time there. The only American cars you'll see are a lot of old Chevys and Pontiacs and Buicks and things like that from the 40s and 50s. You'll see those kind of rolling around all over the place. Now those cars have been modified and repaired and patched up and updated. Many of them have had the original engines taken out and switched for diesel engines and other things. And then the other thing I noticed was that they use a lot of horse and horse-drawn carriages. We saw horses all over the place. There was horses tied up alongside the road, eating the grass alongside the road. You'd see horses tied up outside people's houses throughout the countryside, horses tied up in the city on little islands and patches of grass. They're eating grass. And then you would see these carriages running, all over the place, especially when we were out into more of the countryside. That is their primary source of transportation, and they'll use scooters and motorcycles and other forms of transportation. But many of them, especially in the countryside, are using cart and buggy. They're using horses with carts or just horses with saddlebags and other things to transport themselves and goods back and forth from their farms or homesteads. The second day that we were there, we were able to get up and take a trip out into the countryside. So we were able to go up into a couple villages a few hours outside of Cienfuegos. And this is where things really got interesting. I was really able to see how the smaller homestead or farm type communities were living and what they were doing. And I was really inspired by their use of the things or the resources that they had available to them. A couple that we met there out in one of these villages invited us to take us up into the hillside to show us this really cool waterfall. So we made our way up to this waterfall that we're going to go find here. The car behind us, they drove the pastor and his wife from this village that we're in, and we just been driving for about a half an hour up these mountains. So we're gonna look for a waterfall. That's where we're headed. And it was just kind of in the backyard of some little farmer homestead there. No signs, nothing on the map. This was just something just kind of off the beaten path. And we went over and just saw this really beautiful waterfall and this little pool and river that came off of it. And just off to the side of that waterfall area was this really cool structure. It looked like it had been built as maybe some type of a past or future tourist attraction. It didn't look like it was used very often, but it was built almost entirely from resources that they had available to them there. The decking and all that was built with rough sawn lumber that they probably, got from a neighbor or someone in the community or bought or traded for somewhere to get the decking that went into that building. The roofing was, looks like some tin roofing in some areas and maybe some asphalt roofing in others. But most of the structure was made out of vines and logs that were cut down probably from right around that area. Even the bracing that goes and all the joists that went underneath the decking were just made of logs. It was no dimensional lumber, no trip to Home Depot. Everything was built with what they had available. That to me was a cool reminder. This is exactly how we want to live our life here. We want to get to a point where we can use the trees and the lumber that we have. We can utilize our community to trade for things that we don't have, and things that we produce as an abundance here, we can sell to get money to buy things we don't have. And that's exactly what they're doing there. They're living the off-grid homestead life. And as we walked back to the road through the nearby farmhouse, we were able to see their free-range chickens running around. Some of them I could identify as a certain breed, and some of them looked like kind of mutts, I guess you'd say. Just they're just a free-ranging flock of chickens. They're breeding. Some of them had chicks that they were raising up, and due to the warmer climate, it probably happens year-round. They're able to just continue with this kind of free-range, sustainable flock of chickens that ran around their homestead. They were using water from the nearby waterfall or river, and it piped into their house, and it would go into these little basins and then pour out. They could use that for washing things or watering gardens or other things right around there, and then it would just kind of go down a drain and trickle back to the river, and the chickens were drinking out of it, and their other livestock could get up and get water from those little sources of water that just kind of flowed through there year-round without any electricity or anything. A lot of them had pigs and cows kind of free-ranging through their little pastures. There was turkeys that we saw there. They had a little kitchen garden on the way out where they were growing some cucumbers and other things. And then we also saw a lot of coffee trees. There were coffee trees growing all around their houses, and that was what I found out kind of their main source of income. We saw some mules and donkeys and other things, up in the mountains carrying these packs of coffee that had been harvested, down to market somewhere. Now, they weren't truly off-grid. We did see power lines run through the countryside into the houses, but the wiring and other things there was very crude and basic. Whatever wire they could find was run, generally tied together or twisted together with no wire nuts or connectors or boxes or anything like that, where there was exposed wires kind of just all over these houses and these outbuildings. But they just made it work with whatever they had, and it seems to work well for them. Whatever small lighting or appliances that they do have that are electric, they were able to make them work however they could. So we just found this house up here. I guess we're eating at this up here. So throughout this little excursion, we stumbled upon this little house that was next to the road, and one of the people that were with the Cubans that were with asked if they had a meal for us. And I'm not sure how that all worked, because it didn't look like a restaurant or anything like that. It was just a woman's little farm homestead, and we went down and walked down through a little trail down by the river and sat down at a rickety old picnic table under a DIY pavilion that was made out of logs and trees and things. And she served us this great Cuban meal, this great Cuban lunch. It was some pork and rice and beans and these I can't remember what they're called, this cassava root I think it was. It's like a potato almost, and these plantain chips and all this great food that we had there. And then invited us up for coffee afterwards, and we were able to kind of check out the inside of her house and the kitchen. And again, we saw the running water from the river piped into the kitchen sink where she would use to prepare food and wash dishes. Flocks of chickens ranging all throughout the house and outside the house, cats running around. And it was just a really cool country little home where all the food was prepared. There was, a place right next to it. It looks like you could just throw food scraps right out from the kitchen. Chickens would run over and eat those scraps, and that was how, I'm sure that they got a lot of their food. They were completely free range and self-sustaining. I highly doubt that they were, running to TSC or Family Farm and Home and grabbing, bags of grain and things like that to feed these animals. They were self-sustaining, free range animals. And because of the warmer climate there, they had food available to them throughout the countryside year-round. And so it was a great example of sustainable living and raising those animals that they could produce eggs and meat for them without really any input. The other cool thing that I noticed is their use of fencing material. So this is something that I have seen people do, these living fences. A lot of times people use willow or other trees. They use some type of fast-growing tree, and they, instead of buying a bunch of fence posts and fencing, they would plant these trees in rows around where they wanted to contain their animals, very close together, so maybe 6 inches apart or even sometimes closer. And as those trees grew up, a lot of them looked like they're only a few years old. They would maybe run a string of barbed wire down the fence, a string or two of barbed wire, depending on what they wanted to contain, and that was their fence posts. I saw very few actual fence posts, and certainly nothing that was purchased. If I did see a fence post, it was a tree that was cut down and stuck in the ground. It wasn't anything that they bought anywhere. So it was another great example of this sustainable type of agriculture. It was a way for them to contain their horses and their animals, their livestock, and raise these animals with really buying almost nothing but maybe a roll of barbed wire to string around. And so it was very inexpensive and great way to use those resources. We also saw in several town areas in the city and by the beach of where they would use these, they would make privacy fences. Instead of going and buying a bunch of pickets and building a privacy fence, they would use cactus or cacti, and they would grow these cactuses real close together in a square around their patios or around their yards. So although this wasn't the main reason that I was there, I certainly learned a lot, and I was very inspired by the use of the materials and resources that people had there. And I think they're a lot further along than we are here at Living Sustainably. I mean, they have a lot to teach us on that kind of living. And it was just a great learning experience for us and inspiring. So I'm ready to get back to work here on the SSL family farm or homestead and take some of those practices and things that I learned there and apply them here as we are on our journey to become more sustainable and provide more for ourselves off the land that God has provided us here. And so hopefully you guys enjoyed the quick Cuba update. There'll be lots more stuff coming out soon. I'm home. I'm ready to start digging into projects. So you're going to see lots of videos coming out. So stick around for that. Don't forget to hit thumbs up on the video today. Throw those questions and comments down below. If you have questions about the trip or about Cuba or about anything like that, throw it down below. I'll try to answer those. And of course, subscribe if this is your first time to the SSL Family Dad channel. Love to have you tag along. Lots of good stuff coming up. Maple syrup season's around the corner, so love to have you tag along for that. And as always, guys, thanks for watching. Have a good one.